Yo, Headliner Nation, what is going on? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and we're going to try to talk about some potential Week 10 waiver wire additions for your team, but I'm going to just put this caution up in advance, this parental advisory sticker. It's bad. It's gross. It's downright disgusting. There's not going to be much out there for you to take a shot at this week, so we are going to try to really dive deep and find some guys that, who knows, maybe you can grab to stashes a little bit of depth, or maybe if you've had an injury, not very many this week, thank God. But, you know, we'll see what we've got. There's not going to be a whole lot, though, but we're going to jump right into it. Let's kick it off. We're going to talk about the running backs. And again, probably the number one waiver wire priority this week would be Jeff Wilson Jr. if he's available in your league. Now, a lot of people dropped him that owned him when he was with San Francisco. That's too bad. I don't think anybody really saw him being traded, though. So now he lands in Miami. Kind of gets off to a good start. He averaged 5.7 yards per carry this past game compared to Mostert's 2.9. He had the same number of carries as Raheem Mostert, and he had a reception TD. So, Jeff Wilson comes into an offensive scheme that he knows, that he's familiar with. He's able to kind of get in there right away, and it looks like he is going to push Mostert for at least some sort of a 50% touch share, which, in this type of climate where we don't have a whole lot of options, not a bad grab. Now, depending on the platform, he's anywhere from about 45 to 55% owned. Could be a little bit higher, may already be owned in your league. But again, if you're out there right now playing in a league that has him on the waiver wire, more than likely he'll be the number one priority this week. Jordan Wilkins, Zach Moss, both from Indianapolis, keeping an eye on them. Deion Jackson, he got hurt. Not sure if he's going to miss any time. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor is still banged up. Jordan Wilkins kind of stepped in as the lead back over Phillip Lindsay. 3 carries, 5 targets in the passing game. Lindsay's had some opportunities to come in this season and be just depth, but he hasn't really done anything other than that. So the other guy to really keep an eye on is going to be Zach Moss. I mean, obviously, they brought him back in that trade with Buffalo. Did they do it for a reason? Did they bring him in because they think he's a guy that they could utilize? That's going to be something to keep an eye on moving forward. Am I running to grab him right now? Probably not. But if you were to stash him on your bench, who knows? Maybe in the next week or two, maybe you do have a guy that is getting a few touches if JT misses more time. Rachaad White from Tampa Bay. I mean, I'm going to toss him up here again. I've had him in the last few shows. The problem is that it doesn't matter who's running the football for Tampa Bay. They're not doing anything. So you're not really getting a ton on the ground with anyone from Tampa. I mean, they threw the ball almost 60 times this past week. They're not very efficient on the ground right now. Rachaad White, he's taking a little bit more as a time. Every single week he gets a little bit more and a little bit more, but he's not going to pass a 50-50 share with Leonard Fournette. So Rachaad White for me is really more of a Leonard Fournette injury backup type of guy, not really a standalone value that you might be grabbing to try to put in your lineup anytime soon, especially with the majority of the buys kind of being behind us now. We've only got 4 teams on buys this week, so hopefully we're starting to get some guys that we need back and ready to move forward. Kylan Hill from Green Bay. Aaron Jones left this past week with an ankle injury against Detroit. As of this recording, not 100% sure how serious it is. It does sound like it could be a week-to-week type of thing. He could have at least a couple of weeks coming up where he's going to be missing. Obviously, A.J. Dillon becomes the lead back at that point. So if he's been dropped in your league for any reason, A.J. Dillon, you're definitely going to want to grab right away. He's still right around that 75-80% owned across different platforms, though, so more than likely not available. Obviously, he is. A.J. Dillon would be your number one grab. Number 2, though, for A.J. Dillon owners, maybe grab a Kylan Hill and just kind of stash him behind A.J. Dillon. Dillon hasn't looked great this season, so if we have the backup to him, if they do try to do a little bit more of a split like we've seen him do with Aaron Jones and Dillon, then you're going to have his backup. Isaiah Spiller for the Los Angeles Chargers. For you Austin Eckler owners out there, he's kind of stepped into that RB2 role now, it seems like. He's the guy that's kind of number 2, playing the most snaps, playing more snaps this past week than Sony Michel. Owners of Austin Eckler need to take notice at this point and decide, hey, do I have an extra spot to grab him and hold him? Do I not? He is starting to become the number 2, though, behind him. So if anything were to happen to Eckler, we're going to see a whole lot more of Isaiah Spiller. And then Tyler Algier, again, he's kind of right on like that 65% owned. Just kind of throwing him out there again because Atlanta's going to be on a short week and they're going to be going up against Carolina that just got absolutely smashed by Joe Mixon. So because of that, when you take a look at everything around us, is Tyler Algier worth a grab this week? Again, on a short week, Cordero Patterson came back, but they're not going to want to push him too hard on a short week. We'll probably see another split close to what we saw last week. Yes, 44 of the 99 yards from Tyler Algier did come on one run, but if we got a guy that's going to get 10, 11, 12 carries on Thursday Night Football against a team that just got smoked anyway, he might be worth a grab this week, and he might be worth somebody that actually we could potentially flex next week, even if it is a high risk. Jumping on over to the wide receiver position for the Houston Texans, two different potential options. Again, very gross, though. I don't know if you're wanting to really spend any type of a waiver wire priority on these guys. Phillip Dorsett, Chris Moore, Nico Collins is injured. Brandon Cooks is really not wanting to do anything with Houston right now. And Dorsett, he led the team last week with 69 yards on 3 receptions. Chris Moore, a little bit more of an even day, 5 targets, 4 receptions, 43 yards and a touchdown. Going to be going up against the New York Giants this week, which is going to be a really tough matchup for the pass anyway. So probably skipping on both of these guys unless you're in like a really deep league and you're desperate for someone to just get in your lineup. DeAndre Carter from the Los Angeles Chargers. Josh Palmer, too highly owned at this point, but Carter a decent second option. Keenan Allen missing again, re-aggravating that hamstring injury. Mike Williams is banged up right now. Carter last week, a very pedestrian day, 6 targets, 5 catches, 53 yards. Nothing to write home about, but again, another guy that if you were to grab and just kind of stuff into your lineup, if he can get you 50, 60 yards, that's going to be a lot better than a majority of what you could end up putting out there. And they're going to get San Francisco this week, so expecting a little bit of a back and forth matchup there. Terrace Marshall Jr., a guy I liked last year in the draft a lot, finally has himself a pretty decent day. Now, 6 targets is good, 3 receptions. Would like to see a little bit more receptions, but big plays are there, 53 yards, 1 touchdown. Baker came in at halftime last week, and Terrace Marshall Jr. proceeded to have a good second half of the game, tied for the team lead in targets. Now, again, Carolina was down by a lot. I was trying to figure out a way to sugarcoat that, and I couldn't think of anything other than they were just down by a lot. But yeah, Carolina was down by a lot, so of course they had to throw in the second half. They're going to get Atlanta this week, though. Atlanta's secondary does tend to give up a few fantasy points to wide receivers. Big play for Terrace Marshall this week could end up paying dividends for fantasy owners. Rondale Moore for Arizona, another good week this week. 10 targets, 8 receptions, 69 yards. Led the wide receivers again this week. He's starting to carve out a pretty big role in this offense. Really boom or bust for me, though. Again, we're looking at 8 receptions for 69 yards is good. He could pull in 4 receptions for, 80 yards and a touchdown. So really depending on who they're playing, they're going to be getting the Los Angeles Rams, though, this coming week. Rams defense feels like it's really been up and down. It really has. For Rondale Moore, the opportunity is there for him to have a good week this week. But again, it's really going to be boom or bust. He's more of a guy that I want to toss in as like a wide receiver 3 this week instead of like a wide receiver 2. Mecole Hardman for Kansas City. I mean, he's scoring a lot. He is scoring a lot, but I'm hesitant to still try and run him out there because a lot of his fantasy value is predicated only on touchdowns. Now, he did have 9 targets this past week, but Patrick Mahomes threw the ball like 60 darn times this past week. Is that going to happen every single week? I mean, it could in this offense, but Travis Kelce's the number 1. Juju Smith-Schuster is the number 2. We brought in Kadarius Toney, so how long until we see him get going a little bit more? For Mecole Hardman, it just seems like if you're going to play him, you've got to pray for a touchdown every single week, and I hate relying on wide receivers to do that, especially when we know we're going to be starting Travis Kelce and we know we're going to be starting Juju Smith-Schuster after another good week. Are we really locking in Mecole Hardman every single week? They are going to get Jacksonville this week, though, so we'll see. He could end up getting into the start column for sure. Odell Beckham Jr., not owned, but, not, probably highly owned right now because of the injury, not being on any teams. People have been asking about him for a couple of weeks. It's been like, do we really know when he's going to go on? But now we're starting to hear reports that he's going to be cleared very soon. So now that we're getting a little bit better of a timeline, I do think it is worth the effort to go ahead and start stashing him at this point. The Cowboys could be in the mix. The Giants could be in the mix. So it's really going to depend upon on where he lands. But for now, I think he's getting close enough to returning that we do try to run out there and we do try to grab him and add him to our team, because then at that point, we can make a decision on whether or not we just cut him loose and be done with it, or we keep him, we stash him, and we see how he integrates into his new team. And then my Fantrax Find of the Week, presented by our friends over at Fantrax. Samori Toure from Green Bay. Is he going to be the next man up? Dobbs, went down with a pretty nasty injury, was ruled out basically right away. Watson took a really hard hit again and had to leave the field due to concussion protocols. Over the last 2 weeks, Toure has 8 targets. He has 71 receiving yards and a touchdown. He is a guy that really could end up being kind of that next man up for a wide receiver core that is really, really banged up. You could take a shot at, Sammy Watkins if you want to, but I really don't know if I am. Toure is a guy that I think I'd rather take a stab at this point. What about the tight end position? After a few duds this past week at the tight end position, who's going to be somebody we could grab going forward? Cole Kmet would be my number one option at tight end. He was the guy that I did like before the beginning of the season. Really thought he would be essential to Justin Fields taking a step forward, and now Justin Fields is taking a step forward. We're seeing Cole Kmet get some looks his way. 3 touchdowns over the last couple of games, 5 receptions on 6 targets, 51 yards, 2 touchdowns this past week in a shootout with Miami. Now they're going to get Detroit this coming week, who, Detroit did look better. They did look better against Aaron Rodgers, but it's still a defense that I'm not 100% sold on really being the defense we've seen over the last 2 weeks. They're still going to give up some big plays. They're still going to do some things. They are banged up as well now. So Cole Kmet this coming week, definitely touchdown dependent going up against Detroit with the way Fields has been playing. Noah Fant for Seattle led the team last week in receiving yards, also had 6 targets, 5 receptions. Unfortunately, he's just not consistent enough for me. So Noah Fant, another option that we could potentially be looking at moving forward, going up against Tampa Bay. Probably going to have to throw it a little bit against Tampa Bay this coming week. And then Cade Otton, again for Tampa Bay. Finally has a really good week. Kind of been, mentioning him for a couple of weeks now. He hasn't really done anything, but I'm being careful with it because, again, Tom Brady threw the ball 58 times. Are we really going to have Brady throwing the ball 58 times every single week out there, especially with an opponent like Seattle coming up next? I highly doubt it. So I am being careful with Cade Otton, but again, another guy out there if you're dealing with any type of injuries. All right, let's move on to some options that we can stream this week, and we're going to talk about quarterbacks first. Justin Fields is still under 60% owned on multiple platforms. At this point, he's not a streaming option. He's a pick-up and play option, especially with Detroit this week. The rushing upside is crazy every single week now, so for Justin Fields, 100% needs to be owned and probably is going to be a starter moving forward unless you have a top-tier option. Baker Mayfield for Carolina. The Bake Show seems to be back to quarterback 1 status. He comes in for PJ Walker after Walker had an absolute awful first half. He comes in and goes 14 of 20 for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now he gets Atlanta on Thursday Night Football. And Daniel Jones, the last time we brought him up as kind of an option to throw out there and stream, didn't have a great game. But now they're coming out of the bye. They're getting a Houston team that could allow definitely some rushing yards to Daniel Jones. He's back to being a streaming option for me this week. Defensive special teams that we could stream. Only 2 that I'm going to talk about. The Denver Broncos, it depends on your platform. He's over 60% on a couple of platforms and he's under 40 on a couple of others. But they're going to get a Tennessee team that has absolutely refused to throw the ball. Will Ryan Tannehill be back? Even if they throw the football, Denver's defense has been absolutely spectacular against the pass this year. Yes, no more Bradley Chubb, but even with that being said, the Broncos definitely in a position could offer you some good return for a streaming option this week. And then the New York Giants going up against Houston. Houston's already without their 2 top wide receivers. If the New York Giants can find an answer for Dameon Pierce, they're not. Houston's not even one-dimensional. They're non-dimensional at that point. They're really just going to not have any options to run to. They're going to try to run the football. But again, if you're running right into the New York Giants and they're able to stop that, do you have enough weapons at wide receiver to make them hurt? Probably not. The Giants, another great streaming option this week. And now some players to drop. A few players that have already been on here, adding a few more that we might not be dropping as of yet, but we might be getting close to or not starting anymore. Drake London for Atlanta, another awful performance this week. 6 targets, yeah, but only 2 receptions. Robert Woods, again, Tennessee's not even throwing the football right now. Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims got 4 targets this past week. So Elijah Moore is not even a part of the game plan in New York. If you've been trying to hold out hope for him, that hope is probably past. Hunter Renfrow for Las Vegas. I mean, even with no Waller, he hasn't been fancy viable. 5 targets, 4 receptions, absolutely no upside. Outside of Devontae Adams, they're spreading the ball around quite a bit. Brian Robinson for Washington. The only reason that we're still hanging on to Brian Robinson right now is depth. You know, he's not a guy that we want to just throw to the waivers quite yet, but Antonio Gibson is basically taken over 50% of this backfield. Seeing more work in the passing game, 50-50 split basically at this point, and touches on the ground as well. So Brian Robinson, we're holding still at this point for depth, but we're not really starting him unless something were to happen to Antonio Gibson. Eno Benjamin, right now I'm only going to hold him if I'm the James Conner owner, but Conner's first game back, more targets and more looks on the ground. So Eno Benjamin kind of done at this point. And then Cam Akers, if you were also holding out hope for Cam Akers, really at this point, I think we can move past Cam Akers. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot there the rest of the season. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The waiver wire is very bare and thin this week, but hopefully we've got a few options that you might be able to take a look at if you're desperate for some help. Hit the like button for me. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Leave a comment down below. Who are you thinking of grabbing? Who's someone that you might need to drop to do it? I'll try to respond to a few this week and give you some answers on my part. But hey, everybody have a great rest of the day. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. Peace out. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.